Hello and welcome to the Serious Games Podcast, all about playful methods for interactive trainings and facilitation. Let's get started. So welcome back to the Serious Games Podcast. And today I'm connected to Sydney, directly with Tony. And oh my God, we just got hung up in the pre-talk because Tony has a large collection of really old artifacts, one could say. So 20 years ago, he got to know the Sam Loyd puzzles, and he just showed, I'm connected with him via Zoom, right? So he showed me all those old magazines and the books and how he got, in contact and how it's protecting not only the brand, but the puzzling world. Look, this is your intro, Tony. Thanks for being on the podcast. And I'm going to hand it over to you saying welcome. And two questions. Number one, who are you? Can you give us a short introduction? And number two, how would you explain this? I wouldn't say like one puzzle, but this puzzling experience to someone who's not really so much into puzzling.
Great, Julian. Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and speak to your listeners as well. So it's really exciting. My name's Tony. I work for the Sam Loyd Company. My job pretty much is to protect and let people know about the work of both Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr. And it's something that we protect because a lot of the times their work has been forgotten. And our job is to make sure that their work is not only remembered, but available to everyone who are puzzle lovers as such.
Great. And look, Tony, how did you get in contact with the work? I understood, or just loop us in, Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr., who were they and what did they do?
Definitely. So Sam Loyd was born in Philadelphia in 1841 in the United States, and then he moved to New Jersey and to New York with his family. That his father was one of the wealthiest property developers of his time. So he moved over there, and then he became pretty much a very big chess fanatic to the point where he is inducted into the Chess Hall of Fame.
Okay,
so
wow.
He's written a lot of chess problems and is very highly regarded within the world of chess today. Then in around about 1868, he started developing his own puzzles. So he started developing mathematical puzzles and cut-up puzzles and so forth. And pretty much his first puzzle was the puzzle of, or what they call the pony puzzle. And the pony puzzle, I just happen to have a copy of it here. This is his puzzle, and that's exactly right, Julian. You've got the make of it exactly the same. And what that pretty much was is just a matter of just cutting the puzzle up, and then from cutting the puzzle up and rearranging it to find another horse. This proved such a success that he decided to then concentrate his business on doing puzzles as such, little puzzle cards. And what would happen is that people, in this case here, would pay him to put their marketing on the top, naming rights, and on the back, they would have about the products and services of that particular product.
All right.
Or company.
Interesting.
So that's pretty much what he started off doing, and that became very, very popular. And then he decided to pretty much spend his early years doing puzzle cards and for advertising purposes and things like that. And so he expanded from there.
Cool. It sounds very interesting. So look, we actually just held a puzzle in the camera. Our listeners cannot see that, but I will provide some links and pictures so that you get an idea. Again, this is a cut-up puzzle, and then at the end it's 3 pieces, and you have to arrange them. You're not allowed to further cut them, fold them, or I don't know, copy them or redraw them. But you rearrange those 3 pieces to find another horse in that case, right? And
definitely,
look, Tony, why does it take so long for the people to figure that out?
It is, and the thing with Sam Loyd, what he loved is to make the puzzles look easy, but
Mm-hmm.
then once they try to solve them, it's hard.
Okay. Just like
Yeah,
real world problems, huh? But
definitely,
sometimes it's the other way around, right? They look hard and then they're easy to solve. Okay, so
definitely.
that's only one of the puzzles
Mhm.
that he created back in the days, right? And
Definitely.
how many are there? I mean, I mean, you sent me some
Mhm.
in advance, but how many are there in total?
So I would say so he pretty much worked from around 1868
Mm-hmm.
until around about 18, 1883 is
Mm.
when he was really getting into his puzzle cards. He actually also had his own printing press in
Okay.
Elizabeth, New Jersey, in Elizabeth, New
Mm.
Jersey as such.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
So, and did you have it like? I mean, is there? Okay, I'm going to ask you how you got in contact
Yeah.
with the puzzles, but is there where all puzzles documented and retrieved, or do you think there's still some undiscovered Sam Loyd puzzles out there?
I would say there probably is, something that might have disappeared as such.
Mm,
Some of the puzzles and so forth. Some of
mhm.
them that we do, some of them and so forth. But when you look at them, we've got the famous trick donkeys puzzle,
Right.
and we've got a number of other puzzles that he produced in his own printing press in
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, where he would sit there. What he's actually said was in the evenings he would draw these puzzles, engrave them, and then he would print them, and then they would be distributed throughout the world, pretty
Okay.
much.
Wow.
But
Okay.
a lot of these puzzles, here's an original one from 1871.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
as you can see with these ones, they're actually cut up puzzles. So
Mm-hmm.
you can see that one there. This is over 150 years old,
Wow.
and it's pretty much he did that for P.T. Barnum, who was a very famous circus owner,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and he was the first one to put his name on those, P.T.
Mm-hmm.
Barnum, and then cut them out, and he produced
Wow.
them or distributed them in the millions,
Okay.
but they're
Wow.
very super rare to have these days.
Wow. Okay. And once again, Tony was holding, this original
Mhm. Yeah.
these original puzzle cards in the camera. We're
Mhm.
gonna see how many pictures we can add to the podcast. Now, look, there's another name, and then I really want to get into how you are reproducing them, but then also the learning experience behind or in
Definitely,
those cards.
definitely,
So,
definitely,
there's also a second name, Sam Loyd Jr., who then
definitely.
continued the work.
That's correct.
Mm,
So Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr. worked together
mm,
from 1898. So Sam Loyd Jr. was started creating puzzles as an early child as well. He
mhm.
was having them he had a great influence obviously from his father. He
Sure.
published them in a number of newspapers, and then
Uh-huh.
in 1898 he left prior to that and moved to the United Kingdom. He lived
Okay.
in London for a couple of years
Mm.
and produced puzzles in Europe for the European audiences. Came back to America in 1898. Worked
Uh-huh.
for his father, who owned the Sam Loyd Company at that point in time, and together
Okay.
they created puzzles and so forth and distribute them together throughout the United States and around the
Mm.
world as well. And
Wow.
he is not only is he a great successor to his father,
Mhm.
but he is a great equal to his father in the way that he constructed the puzzles and so
Right.
forth.
Okay.
And he estimated in the interview that
Mhm.
he had produced over 10,000 puzzles
Wow.
during his lifetime.
Wow. Okay. Well, quite a history,
Yes.
and quite a heritage. So you got to know their work, and you said about 20 years ago, right? And how did that happen?
That is correct. So I came across, some of the early Sam Loyd puzzle cards,
Hmm.
and
Just by
I was trying
coincidence,
to
or were you specifically
just by
looking for them?
coincidence.
Okay.
Well, I used to collect card games,
Uh huh.
Victorian card games, old card games, and I came across some of Sam Lloyd's puzzles. And I had a friend of mine who was a designer, graphic designer, and he goes, "Oh, would you mind if I reproduced some? And then you can, introduce them to a whole new generation of puzzle enthusiasts." And so we did that. And then I created a website, and people were going, "This is fantastic. This is exactly," they started buying them from the website. And they started saying to me, "Wow, are you going to have some of Sam Loyd's other puzzles available?"
Okay.
And so I'm going, "You mean there's more? Who is this Sam Loyd?" There was no information about, just a wiki page, but nothing about Sam Loyd Jr., anything along those lines there. So I made it my task or my job to not only find out about Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr., but also reintroduce their work to a whole new audience of puzzle enthusiasts around the world.
Cool. That sounds great. And I know, again, we've spoken beforehand. This is not only taking the puzzles, but as you are sharing the story behind, I know you're already printing them on quite similar material, right? You're really going into details, right? So you're trying to get the same feeling and the same materials connected again.
Definitely. And so one of the puzzles that we have is, of course, Sam Loyd's most famous puzzle card, which is the famous Trick Donkeys. Now, Sam Loyd, that's correct. Now, Sam Loyd, this is the original one. As you can see, it's got Marshall and Ball. So he would license these out. Now, what happened was that Sam Loyd chose a certain type of cardboard to be used for the experience. So when someone gets the famous Trick Donkeys, they're getting the same cardboard that Sam Loyd used over 150 years ago to ensure that the experience they're getting today is the experience that people had 150 years ago. So it's not that we've just printed it on any sort of cardboard, but we've printed it. Now, we searched high and low to try and find that cardboard. There was no one making it. So we actually had an organization to specially make it for us. And so it's produced the way it was, using the same techniques that Sam Loyd used for the cardboard over 150 years ago. So when you're buying a Sam Loyd famous Trick Donkeys or any card, it's the same as what Sam Loyd used when he first produced it.
Okay, wow. Okay, there's so much love going into these products and puzzles. Okay, I totally understand that. Let's talk about the learner's experience, or what you could learn from solving such a puzzle. I guess there's a whole set of lateral thinking games, right, that we like to bring. Again, I work in the business world. We like to bring this. This could be anything from opening up a training or workshop with these out-of-the-box thinking approaches, and then we get to talk about how it is important to look at problems or questions from different angles, maybe how to use different methods, etc., etc. But if I put, these cards on the table, I mean, there are different reactions, right? From
Definitely.
Oh, great, let's just do something with it. So people are cutting it or tearing it apart and then trying to solve it, right? Like learning by doing, iterations, testing it out. Others are just, I would say, staring at them and trying to figure it out in their head, not moving it, maybe going from left and right just a little bit. And then I also encounter learners that say, "Oh my God, I'm not good at this. Let someone else, either in the team or in my table group, solve that." So what do we make out of these reactions? And maybe there are many more reactions that you get. Maybe even what was the longest time someone took to solve one of your questions? Maybe you have a little story about that. What would you say is the learning benefit from solving puzzles?
So I think both Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr. were very adamant when it came to creating their puzzles to ensure that people learned something from it. Now, the thing with the famous Trick Donkeys is the biggest learning experience you can have from that is to think outside the square. So think outside what you normally consider how things should work. So as we know, the object is to cut the card, to then lay the two riders on the donkeys so that they're racing at the same time. Now, there are some interesting features on there. And so people will battle to try and find the answer. They will put it upside down. They'll put it sideways. It looks a lot harder than what people have. I actually enjoy giving someone a card or someone getting a card, cutting it up, and they're trying to work out how they can put the riders on the donkeys at the same time. And so to answer your question, the person I had that took the longest was probably 3 months. He actually took 3 months, and he did not want any hints. He did not want the answer. He wanted to solve it himself. And so it took him 3 months of doing it. I've had other people take a day.
Yeah.
And so some people, usually it's interesting when you give it to someone who's an architect. Most of the time it's architects that can solve it a lot quicker than what, for example, some other people might solve it. But the fact is that it just shows you to think outside of this, think outside the box. It's interesting that people have to think that. And so Sam Loyd's big mantra was to make puzzles look easy, but they were actually hard.
Okay. And, I sometimes give the puzzles to learners sitting in little table groups, right? So there is already a different angle built in, right? Because you can also observe your colleagues sitting to your left and right and in the opposite, solving that puzzle, right? And then, one could also reflect on how, let's say either the team approach or at least pairing up and 3 or 4 minds can sometimes solve problems quicker, right? If they have a method to it. It's an interesting one. All right. Now, focusing even more on the learner, right? You get this challenge and you go through a lot of feelings, right? Let's start even with the self-talk and feelings, depending on what happens quicker. It's like, oh my God, just another, puzzle game, or just another thing I'm not good at, or, oh, great, I so want to figure this out, right? It's going to help me refocus or focus on something else, all the way to, why are we doing this, right? Questioning. So I would say there's this initial reaction, right? And then most of the time, again, I'm using it in workshops mostly. They start just fiddling around with it, right? Knowing that it's going to be an activity. We're here to maybe do something creative, maybe think outside of the square in general, or to get to know some creativity method whatsoever. So they're normally with me, right? I can lead them into at least starting, right? And then some get frustrated, right? Especially if I tell them, well, look, if you solved it, don't tell your colleagues, right? Because there's a difference between figuring it out myself, even if it takes 3 months, and someone just handing this out and telling me how to solve it, right? What would you say is the difference? And what oh my God, not human beings, or what could we as riddlers get out of that experience?
I think one of the biggest consumers of these particular puzzle cards, in particular the famous trick donkeys, are people who are actually trainers. Whether it's people who are training for, they're training to create better salespeople, or they're training people who are HR people, or so forth. People who are trainers tend to use these puzzles to show people how to work together or how to work on your own in solving a problem. So every single day, we have some sort of problem that we need to solve.
Absolutely.
And so whether or not that's a problem, we've got a problem at work where we've got to try and, something's come up. We may have, our colleagues that we've got issues with. We may have people within the teams or so forth. So what these puzzles actually show you is that there's a way that you can solve problems if you think outside the normal way of solving a problem. So you've got to look at it from a whole. You've got to stand back and look at these things. And so with Sam Loyd puzzles in general, and with puzzles in general, people enjoy solving them because it gives them something. It gives them some sort of satisfaction that they're able to take on a particular problem and solve it. So a lot of people, as I said, who take these puzzles and introduce the puzzle cards into their training material or so forth, are people who are trying to get people to think outside of the normal way that they think. And so a lot of the times, but the other advantage as well is there's also the situation where people enjoy. It's like winning an Olympic marathon, someone compared it to, or winning some sort of sport. The satisfaction that you have this puzzle, which is a problem, and the satisfaction that you've solved it on your own or with a group of friends, and you've got the solution. And so there's always the whole point with Sam Loyd's puzzles and Sam Loyd Jr.'s puzzles is that they wanted people to know that there's a problem. It's not as hard as what you think it is if you sit down and work it out.
Yeah. And I guess there's I guess one colleague once said you go through, I don't really know if it refers to the change curve, but you go through a whole set of emotions, right? Like from, hey, I can do this, excitement, or again, once again, if you have bad memories with solving such puzzles, like, oh my God, not again, right? And then you get your hands on, you figure it out. Now, in the room, again, this is a group activity then. Everyone is trying to solve it individually, but we're doing this all together in a room. Every now and then there's like this, this is the sounds of excitement. It's like, oh, almost got it. Oh, no, that's wrong, right? So there might be some ideas, excitement, frustration going on over and over again. Now, some will solve it, right? And I normally say, if you know this puzzle, or if you solve it, please don't share it too early, right? Because I like to talk with my learners about figuring it out and pushing through this in a creative process. They call this sometimes the groan zone, right? So pushing through that, sticking with it, let it also sink in. As you said, step back, move around. I guess movement could be important, right? Relax your brain, and that matters. And then coming back, trying out. So this is the iterative approach. You need to try it out. Don't think it over. Do it. It's just 3 pieces. I guess that's why we all love paper prototypes and just, showing it, visualizing it. And then there will be someone in the room who can solve it, right? The next day or maybe even on the spot. Now, I think it's important to then also address the learners that did not solve it, right? To not give them the feeling of, oh my God, I'm not good at this, right? Rather than strengthening either the team approach, as you said, or referring to, well, there are different, I don't know if you would call it learning or solving, problem-solving styles, one could say, right? And yes, there are some that, prefer, maybe a more structured way and more thinking time and then doing, and the other way around, doing, and then, so that's the conversation I then love to spark, right? No matter if you solved it. And then, of course, they get to keep the puzzle so that they can show others. And that's another interesting learning moment. When you give this puzzle to someone, you solved it, the answer. And then you observe them struggling, solving it, right? And then they know that you know. And then they might ask you, oh, tell me. And you might give them some sort of those hints that are not really hints because they're not really helping, but they're just confusing them even more. So how does this whole cycle of solving in groups refer to the day-to-day? I mean, of course, we do have complicated and complex problems. So it's not only 3 pieces. It's sometimes more than 30 stakeholders and their motivations and technology and challenges and the world and the market and artificial intelligence. So how does that refer to the day-to-day of learners? What would you say?
I think the big challenge that we have is when we have a problem in an organization or anything like that, right? It's obviously how we can solve it. And what we need to realize, and I've worked in organizations like this in the past, is that we need to remember that we're not on our own. So we're not a silo. We're not just on our own. We can work with other people to ensure that we can solve the problem as such. And the beauty with Sam Loyd puzzles, for example, is that you can solve them either on your own or you can solve them with a friend. You can solve them with, a parent and a child can solve them. You can solve them. But day to day, what it shows you is that you should never be embarrassed to go to someone, either a colleague or a superior, a supervisor or something like that, a manager or something, and then tell them about the problems and work together in how to solve that. I think the problem is that sometimes we may feel embarrassed or something not being able to solve a problem. Whereas we've got to remember that we're all in this on the same boat in an organization, and we're all there to work together in solving a problem. Sometimes you may have you may have a job that you're not too sure how to execute something within that position. So it's always great to say, you know what, I can't work this out. I'm going to speak to my team leader or my manager or something like that, and together we can work that out. And that's what makes a great leader as well, is that you can sit down there with someone and work out what the problems are. The best way of doing that, and again, that's the beauty with the Sam Loyd puzzles, is that together you can work through them and solve them. You don't ever have to sit back and be embarrassed because you can't solve a puzzle or you can't solve a problem, because a lot of the times problems are a lot more complicated than what we imagine that they are. So it's always a good idea to have someone or work with someone or work with a team to solve a particular problem. And that's the beauty that puzzles show you, is that some people will get frustrated doing them on their own, because they feel that I can't work this out. This is stupid. I can't work it out. I'm wasting my time and things like that, right? But that happens in real life when you've got a particular problem or something is going on in an organization or whatever, and you're being asked to solve it, and you go, well, I can't solve this. This is too complicated. I can't do this. That's when puzzles and things like that open up your mind to say, you know what? I'm not too sure how to solve this, but I know if I get my supervisor, my manager, etc., I can solve this problem. And that way there, what you're doing is you're growing as an individual within that organization as well, by turning around going, wow, I'm a team player. I'm not just on my own. I'm a team player. I can solve problems, and with my leaders, with with my co-workers and so forth.
Right. And I would add, it's nice to have this tacit problem. It's not something on the computer, right? So you can really feel it. You can again turn it, and you can move around it. And yes, I would add, you can figure it out with the teaming up. Let's say that you can then also add, the more complex a problem gets, you can add some other approaches, right? You can add structured approaches of problem solving, right?
Definitely.
They could be super creative. I don't know. I guess there's this TRIZ method, right? Over 40 ways of looking to a challenge from different angles, right? So there are structured approaches that can be learned and that help you to, grind through. Right? It's also about with every step. And that's maybe not just the embarrassment, I couldn't solve it, but with every step, there's maybe a micro failing, right? But there's also a micro learning, right? And what I love doing sometimes there's someone in the room said, "Oh yeah, I know this, but
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the
Mm-hmm.
solution," right? And I
Yes.
love to debrief also on that, saying, well, yeah, that's why we also need to share how we solve
Mm-hmm.
it, but then we need to remember if we forget something, right? Or if we don't write it
Mm-hmm.
up, or if we don't, remember where we've written it up, it's gone, it's lost, right? So that's why those
Definitely.
moments of debriefing, not just a project, but steps, or these days they do, debriefing sprints or reviewing or retrospectives whatsoever, is so important to make this implicit
Mm-hmm.
knowledge explicit, right? To give it and
Definitely.
share it. And now that we've talked about those puzzles and those learning steps, it's not only about sharing successes. It's also
Mm-hmm.
sharing about the approaches that did not work. Like, hey, look, I
Mm-hmm.
tried this and this, I learned this and this, and maybe I got stuck along the way, but my
Mm-hmm.
colleague or someone else is able to pick it up from that point
Mm-hmm.
and to use that information, right? And some might just
Yes.
call it brainstorming, others might just call it, informal chat. Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
why those water cooler talks are so important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you just let your
Mm-hmm.
mind wander around and you play around with it. But Tony, let's face it, in the business world, there's time
Mm-hmm.
pressure, right? We need to
Mm-hmm.
deliver until tomorrow evening.
Mm-hmm.
Does this ultimately, is that a deal breaker? Does this kill creativity? Does this stresses out more cortisol in the brains of our learners? How do we deal with that? If someone gives you the puzzle and say, solve it till 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the thing when it comes to solving problems in business these days or anything like that is sure we do have time limits. We do have people who say, look, we've got a deadline. Let's face the deadline and so forth. But it's you've got to sit back. I think with any problem and analyze what that problem is.
Mm,
And so you can sit back and again you may not be able to solve that puzzle or the problem by 5 o'clock. It's when
mm,
you really need to sit back and go, well, I'm sorry, you've got to be honest with your leaders and managers and expectations and so forth, and say, look, we've got a huge problem, or our stock hasn't arrived in time,
mm,
and we've got to sell. It's winter, we've got to sell 20,000 puffer jackets
mm,
by what's going on. But sometimes things are out of our control. And as an organization, we need to look at alternatives to that particular situation. So there's some
mm,
things that are out of it. And it's this, and it comes again back to puzzle solving or problem solving,
mm,
is that sometimes things are out of our control and we can't
mm,
do anything about it. But what we can do is learn from these. These are all learning experiences. So
mhm,
if our stock hasn't arrived on time and that we've got to get them out into the stores because stores are, what we need to do is take that learning experience and ensure it doesn't happen again.
mhm, mhm,
And that's where every single thing that we have, whether it's a success or a failure, is
mm,
because we need to learn from those. And once we
mm,
learn from those, it allows us to be able to do our jobs a lot better and so
mm,
forth.
mhm, mhm. Got you, got you. I like that debriefing layer of, obviously the puzzle is in our control.
Mm-hmm.
3 pieces, but then what parts of your challenge are out of your
Mm-hmm.
control, and are you trying to,
Mm-hmm.
fix that, and it's not going to work. I was wondering, maybe I will play around with an activity where I would ask different groups or pairs to use different approaches to solve that puzzle, and then to share those approaches. That could be interesting, like on
Definitely.
a debriefing moment.
Definitely.
I also like learning in general when it's
Mm-hmm.
combined with strong emotions
Mm-hmm.
will
Mm-hmm.
stick even more, right? And that's
Yes.
also true for not being able to solve it, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that is, of course, you would have like a more negative feeling, but that's also helpful for the imprinting, learning. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, if you have those endorphins and the positive emotions and the happiness and the enjoyment, right? Um, wow, so much in a puzzle, right?
I think what's interesting is that you've just brought something up really important as well. Now, Sam Loyd didn't just do puzzle cards. So around about the early 1880s and so forth, he pretty much, or in 1898, I should say, 1896, sorry, he started putting puzzles in a newspaper. And so his puzzles expanded because newspapers were becoming quite popular. In 1898, his puzzles ended up being in William Randolph Hearst's newspapers. William Randolph Hearst was one of the most famous publishers in the world. Sam Loyd was one of his stars. He started putting in puzzles in the newspapers and so forth. Now, in some of those puzzles, unfortunately, we've got thousands and thousands of original puzzles, but we don't have the solutions for all these puzzles.
Okay, wow.
So it can. So I sit there and I try to solve them myself and to try and solve them with other people. So I can understand the frustration I have when people are trying to solve puzzles.
Absolutely.
But I actually took some of these puzzles to a group of people. They would have been a group of girls and guys aged in their early 20s. And so they would sit back and they would look at these puzzles and they would go, this is so hard. And I couldn't even give them a hint because I didn't have the answer to some of these. So I've got hundreds of puzzles where I don't have the answers.
Wow.
But we're starting to get the answers. We're starting to work it out. So one of them was extremely difficult to do. And so I had the entire organization trying to find out the solution. And then one day, one of the guys was playing around with this photocopy of this puzzle from one of our books, and he solved it. And you should have seen how everybody in the organization was so happy that we had actually solved that problem. We had found the answer to this problem. So the fact is that it's not just sitting back, one or two people being satisfied that they've got the solution. It works with an entire organization. So seeing their supervisor or their manager saw the experience that they were all having, the satisfaction of working together and solving that problem. One person found the answer, and then everyone was able to share the answer, that their supervisor and manager made it a weekly puzzle competition for them to try and work out how to solve that problem. Now, these people worked in a support call center. So they would have a lot of people calling in with support questions. I look, my website's not working, or what's going on with this, or what's going on with that. So through puzzle solving, they were also able to better answer questions from customers as well, because they were able to see, wow, it's so hard. I've just got this book, Sam Loyd book. It's got this puzzle in there. I can't work it out. They were able to then take that to their customer and say, well, this customer is not an expert in this particular field, but I am. I want them to understand how I'm solving the problem. And so they were able to solve problems because of the way that they were solving the puzzles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this reminds me that I do know some, coaches, agile coaches. They sometimes set up a challenge or a riddle or some games, next to the coffee machine or in the kitchen, let's say, right? And it's just there. And people, in their slack time, they fiddle around. In their breaks, they fiddle around. And I like that you're saying, if this becomes just a way of how we tackle our daily tasks, of course, there are easier challenges and harder ones, we can understand, hey, this is normal, right? And we can understand, as I like to say, everyone has a piece of the solution in his or her head, and we need to come together. And it's just nothing bad. Right. And it's not specifically when I work with teams, it's like, oh, look, well, you as a department or a team are asked to solve this challenge or question for a customer internally, externally. Why does one person in your team get stressed? Right. Where's the dysfunction here? If they ask you as a team, but then you put it on two shoulders. Right. And I really like that. also as a debriefing moment to say, well, some puzzles and challenges just need a little bit more time, right? To be
Definitely,
solved. Okay.
definitely,
And
definitely.
Tony, I would like to add, when we do this together,
Hmm.
we also get to know each other and the way
Yes.
how we tackle problems. So no matter if it's
Hmm.
this is a team that's been working together for quite a while, or participants that see each other for the first time, it's like also
Hmm.
there's this moment of um, going or using the methods or starting to solve such a puzzle as I would also solve
Hmm.
other challenges that are presented to me, right?
I think one of the things that Samler puzzles are as well are they pretty much are icebreakers as well.
Mm.
So you might have a group of people that don't know anybody within that group of people. And
Mm.
so what some people have done, what we've done as well, is we've cut up the puzzles prior to that. We've given everyone on the back of it, there's a number.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that it's a whole group of total strangers. They've got a piece of the donkey puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the back of it, there's a number. And then what they do is that they've got to find the other two people who have got the same number,
Mm-hmm.
and then they become a group.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, instead of other people saying, I don't know anyone, I'm embarrassed, and so
Uh-huh, I
forth,
like
right?
that.
What
Yeah.
happens is that each person has the puzzle, there's a number on the bottom. They find the other two people, and then they become a group. They get to
Mm.
know each other, they get
Mm.
to solve a problem together.
Cool.
And so that would be ideal, in my opinion, to have something like a university or a college or something like
Mm.
that, where they're all new people. And you also don't want cliques in an organization as well. You don't want a group of people to come in there and they've got with their friends and the four of them just stick together right through.
Mm.
They're in the same group, they're in the same session trying to solve the problems together. You want people to be icebreakers.
Right, right, right. And you want to yeah, group think could then happen, and you just want to avoid that, right? For specific problems. Wow, wow, wow.
Definitely,
So
definitely.
so many things to do with again. A cut up puzzle. That
Yep.
is really cool. Look, I'm looking at my notes here, and I'm looking at the
Mhm.
time structured
Yep.
approach. We talked about this. I will link lots of names and newspapers and things that you mentioned. I'll link that in the show notes.
Yep.
Let's talk about it. It sounds like play, but it's not. Actually, other people are playing around with those puzzles. Plagiarism,
Mhm.
right, is
Mhm.
out there. So I totally understand. This has been printed in newspapers. It's old. It's on the internet.
Mhm.
What do you do? I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen, yeah, those PDF files. How do you tackle that? Do you write them and tell them, well, you shouldn't use it, or are there puzzles that everyone can use?
Mhm.
What is your message to the listeners?
I think the big thing when it comes to the famous trick donkeys is pretty much,
Mm.
sadly, it's the most plagiarized
Uh-huh.
puzzle card in the world.
Oh wow.
So,
Mm-hmm.
ever since 1871, when Sam Loyd first invented it and published it, people unfortunately have been copying it. And
Mm.
so, there were all warnings all the time. Please don't
Mm-hmm.
use, please don't use this. For some people, they're not going to, number one, it's unfair on Sam Loyd, who invented this,
Mm.
not to get the recognition. It's
Mm.
unfair that the company, because it is a registered trademark in the
Mm.
United States
Mm.
Patent and Trademark Office. So it's a
Yeah.
legal
Mm-hmm.
trademark.
Mm.
So when you are downloading a PDF or when you are copying it, you're part of the problem. You're not part of the
Mm.
solution.
Yeah.
If you do have, they're only $1.50 plus
Mm.
postage, and they're
Mm.
and you're getting the same experience that
Right.
Sam Lloyd wanted you to from
Mm.
150 years ago. So it's not as though we're charging a huge amount for these cards. What we're
Right.
doing is we're pretty much just charging whatever Sam Lloyd did plus
Mm.
inflation and all that stuff there.
Mm.
So we always say to people, please don't buy books that are not authorized by the company.
Right. Right.
Please don't buy puzzle cards that are not authorized. please don't go to a website and just download or photocopy it or anything along those lines there, because number one, it is illegal to do that. But number two, the person who actually invented it is not getting the credit for inventing it. How would people feel out there if we were to take, their things that they've developed or so forth? It's just not fair. And so the beauty is now that we do have a lot of organizations who do approach us and they go, we would like permission to use the famous trick donkeys or the pony puzzle or something along those lines there. So they always state in all the information that it is a registered trademark of the Sam Loyd Company and used by permission. So we always say to people, if you're an educator out there and you're buying and you want to buy, a whole bunch of these puzzles, just contact us at info@samloyd.com and say, hey, look, and we'll come up with a better price for you if you're looking at bulk buying or something along those lines there. But what we're stressing is just enjoy the puzzle the way that its inventor, Sam Loyd, wanted you to enjoy it 150 years ago. Don't plagiarize it. Don't copy it. Don't go to a website, as we said. And the way you're using it, the way you're doing it, it's special paper. We don't divulge, but we've gone to a lot of trouble in recreating that cardboard that remains a secret as well, because we don't want people going out there trying to organize similar cardboard when we've spent time doing it ourselves.
Right. And I guess, with listening to this podcast and hearing the history and the work that you've put in, and in memory, but also in respect of the work of the Sam Loyds, and the law that you are then putting in and distributing this globally. I guess we got that point across, right? So you do you do, because you were talking about organizations contacting you, you still do those advertisement puzzles pieces where we send you the logo and you put that on?
We certainly do. So we do personalized puzzles. So, for example, there's organizations out there that want their branding on the back of the puzzles. So we would do that. We've had some very large corporations who have actually approached us and they've put their logos on the back. And so we've also had small companies that have purchased 50 copies where we put the logos on the back and they've given it to staff and family and friends. The beauty with these puzzles, and you said this earlier, is that when someone does get one of the puzzle cards or a Sam Loyd book or something like that, they will then, especially with the cards, they'll then, once they know the answer, take it home, share it with their family, their children, their parents, or whoever. And so that card goes on. It's not something that someone will get and throw it in the garbage bin. The life cycle of that will go on and on and on. The beauty as well with all Sam Loyd material that we publish is it's all recyclable, and we're able to, it's environmental friendly as well. So when you're doing that, as I said, it's renewable. We use, for example, in most cases, paper that is recycled. You're able to, if you're not going to use this, you can put it in a recycling bin. You can do something like that. But the best form of recycling I see is to pass that on to a friend or someone else that can then enjoy solving that puzzle. So it's not like a lot of other things where you just throw it out. It's something that can be shared and go on. I had one person who actually said to me that he wanted 3 of the famous trick donkeys because he had ones when he was a child and he carried it in his wallet all his life. So he carried it in his wallet, and then one day his wallet was stolen. And so he didn't have this puzzle, but he came across to the website. He found it. He bought 3. 1 copy was for him and 2 copies were for his grandchildren because he wanted his grandchildren to experience the same thing he experienced when he had the famous trick donkeys puzzle. So it's shared between generations of all people.
That sounds great. Look, I have 2 final questions. And in fact, maybe it's going to be 3. We'll see. You were talking about this cut up puzzles team event, numbers on the back. I love that variation. Are
Mhm.
there any other variations how one could use these puzzles, maybe with larger groups, maybe with smaller groups, staff, etc.? Do you have any more?
I think the beauty with a lot of these is that, as I said, that's famous through donkeys. You can do the same thing with the pony puzzles. You
Mm-hmm.
can do something like that with all of the puzzle cards, etc., that we do, publish and make available on the website.
Mm-hmm.
We have people, for example, who are. You've got to remember, Sam Loyd was around at the same time as some of the most famous presidents in the United States. So we have people who might be political people or historical people who enjoy these puzzles. And so what they're able to do is, if you're able to see Abraham Lincoln on one of our cards, you're able to say, who is this person? Because not everyone will know. So some of the historical people that appear on these cards, even Alice in Wonderland, we have Alice in Wonderland postcards and puzzle cards. You're able to learn more about that historical figure. We know
Mm-hmm.
Alice in Wonderland, for example, was a fictional character that was in Alice in Wonderland, the book. But some of these other puzzle cards, such as U.S. Grant, who was an American general who was part of the United States Civil War. You then had Abraham Lincoln. He's in there as well. So you're able to, it's not just grabbing a card and trying to solve it. People look deeper into it to find out who were these historical figures as well.
Wow, yeah, I like that. So just another layer of not only solving it and the approach and asking for help and don't think in silos and talking to other people about it and not being embarrassed and sharing that feeling even, right, and the enjoyment of doing it and looking at what's in and out of control and sharing the steps that you took and the little failures and the little learnings and the little successes, right? All the way to get to know your peers, right, and their problem-solving skills and approaches, and yeah, that also asking, and just wrote that down with the famous trick donkeys, right? Maybe even
Mhm.
asking them afterwards, or here with the pony puzzle, what's our pony, right? What's our pony
Yes.
in the team, right? What are we
Mhm.
not seeing because
Mhm.
we're not looking from different angles? What are we not being able to solve because we're not teaming up, right? That could be also a nice question. Wow.
I totally agree. And I think the important thing is that with these puzzles and in general, how good it is to work with other people in
Mm-hmm.
solving things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the most important thing of all. When you look at some of the most successful products of all, there's been a problem or there's been something out there that someone's looked at it and they've gone, how can we solve it? How can we make that thing better? And the ideal situation, for example, is the mobile phone or the cell
Mm-hmm.
phone. Whereas before it was just where you could receive a phone call. And then came along Apple, Steve
Mm-hmm.
Jobs, for example, who said, you know what, by introducing this particular smartphone, we're able to solve a whole bunch of problems. So now the smartphone isn't just to receive phone calls, but you can surf the net, you can receive your emails, you can do research, you can do all these things in the palm of your hand. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where a lot of people who sit down and are able to group and work together are able to work together in doing those things.
Yeah, yeah. So then solving and solving a puzzle or challenge can open
Mm-hmm.
up the door for even more. It's not
Definitely.
just a box that you tick off and say, "Oh, great, this is solved," but you can go beyond that and see what else, what
Definitely.
can we do now with this new knowledge, with this new solution, with the new things that we learned about ourselves, about our customers, about the problem or product or service, right? And
Definitely.
not just stop with delivering and then being happy or relieved or relaxed that it's done, but then looking into this. That's why, again, reflecting, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, is very important, and especially as a team, right? Right. Ah, Tony, I'm looking at the time. I feel like we could talk for another hour, right?
Definitely. Definitely.
So, what
Definitely.
for you, just as personally, what is the secret sauce of Sam Loyd's puzzles for you?
Mm-hmm. I think the beauty of it is that a lot of these puzzles had disappeared for centuries. And now we've got original newspapers, we have original magazines, we've rediscovered all these things. And the beauty of it is that people are able to enjoy these puzzles once again. And so what we've done is we haven't got it on the website at the moment, but we've just republished a book. And in that book, it's got a whole bunch of different puzzles that people can work together in trying to solve. And so that's the beauty. We're able to sit back and go, wow, look at all these puzzles in this great book that we've got that people can sit down there and try and solve. And that's the beauty when it comes to, the passion, the Sam Loyd passion, which is him rediscovering these puzzles and so forth, and what we can work together in solving. Definitely.
That sounds great. Wow. Tony, thank you so much for your time and sharing the history and the work and the passion and love that Sam Loyd Jr. and you are putting into this wonderful work that can inspire, individuals, learners, teams to excel, to not only become better problem solvers, but to connect to themselves and to others. And I think that's also very, very important, right?
100%. And I think the beauty with Sam Loyd puzzles is that they're international, regardless of what language, regardless of your background, regardless of whatever you are, whoever you are. It's the great equalizer. You could be the richest person in the world or the poorest person in the world, and you still have the exact same puzzle. There's nothing out there that separates anybody. So it's the great equalizer. That's with all of Sam Loyd's puzzles. They're the great equalizer. So no matter who you are, no matter what you are, no matter what your background is, it's the same puzzle for everybody.
Wow. Great. Yeah, I might steal that quote for lots of serious games in general, right? And
Definitely.
Yeah,
and
perfect.
I think that's the beauty. Definitely.
Tony, once again, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the Serious Games podcast. And I would just encourage all learners not only to re-listen to this episode, but to look out on the Serious Games podcast episode list. There are more and more episodes in German and English language, and I am always happy if you reach out, share your feedback if you like, or if you subscribe to the podcast on any channel. Thank you, and bye-bye from Berlin. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Sam Loyd and Sam Loyd Jr. and their fantastic works. So I hope everyone can get to solve at least one puzzle or two puzzles whenever they possibly can. So thank you, Julian, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.
You can reach us at hello@keylearning.net. We're looking forward to your suggestions, comments, and feedback.